Hello and welcome to the 2015 GFSI Leadership Series brought to you by SafetyChain Software and Food Safety Tech. My name is Patty Murray with Food Safety Tech, and we're excited to get started with the second event in our three-part series, BRC in the Age of FSMA, with special guest speaker John Cuccoli, Director at BRC Americas. Food Safety Tech is very proud to be the media sponsor of this important series, for which we've had more than 1,900 registrants. We have a lot of very valuable information coming your way today, so we're going to get right to it. And now it is my pleasure to introduce you to our moderator for today's webinar, Barbara Levin, Senior Vice President and co-founder of SafetyChain Software. Barbara?
Thank you very much, Patty. And again, welcome everybody to BRC in the Age of FSMA, part of our GFSI series. Again, I'm Barbara Levin. I'll be your moderator today. And before we start with today's exciting event, let me give you just a few important housekeeping announcements. We are being hosted on this platform by WebEx. Should you have any technical questions and you're still logged into the event, you can send a question to the host, or you can call WebEx Technical Support directly at 877-509-3239. Again, 877-509-3239. The recording link of today's event will be sent to everybody who registered via email by close of business on Tuesday. For privacy issues, you can see the names of the hosts and panelists and your name, but you cannot see the name of the other attendees on today's event. Everybody will have a chance to submit questions online after our interview with John Cuccoli, and we'll show you how to do that when we get to that part of our event. We'd also like to give a special thanks to Food Safety Tech for being the media sponsor of our 2015 GFSI series. This is our second year of the series, and we're very excited to work with them, and we want to put a special shout out to them for that. Our agenda today is all about BRC in the Age of FSMA and how BRC certification prepares a company for FSMA compliance. We're first going to look at BRC alignment with FSMA in several areas in general, but also in terms of preventive controls and current good manufacturing practices, foreign supplier vendor verification program, as well as audit readiness. We'll be looking at BRC scheme changes that have been made or planned to better align with FSMA. We'll look at gaps in FSMA that are filled by BRC, and things that you should be doing now to prepare for FSMA on day one compliance if you are or if you're planning to be BRC certified. We'll then take questions, and post-event, everybody is invited to stay for an optional demo of SafetyChain for GFSI to see how SafetyChain can help companies automate their FSMA and GFSI efforts so that they can also be compliant on day one. With that, I'm very excited to welcome our special guest, John Cuccoli, Director of BRC Americas. John joined us during last year's GFSI series, and welcome, John. We're very excited to have you back for BRC in the Age of FSMA. And with that, are going to jump right into the first question for you, so welcome. And I'm going to ask you, before we jump into preventive controls and good manufacturing practices and some of the specific areas, how does BRC certification prepare a company for FSMA compliance in general? So welcome, and I've already thrown a question to you.
Thank you very much, and thanks to yourself, Barbara, and SafetyChain for having me. I appreciate it. Obviously, FSMA is a huge topic for everyone involved in the food industry, and discussions we've had with FDA, discussions we've had with other groups have, up to this date, said, you know what, BRC certification is 90% of the way there. It's going to really cover off the vast majority of what we're looking for when we start rolling out the individual expectations within the Food Safety Modernization Act. And that's really given us a lot of good background. We've started to additionally, relook at some of our standards to make sure that they're functional and maybe can be improved to add a little bit more, or how can we best reflect the requirements of the Food Safety Modernization Act. And as well, a lot of the folks on this call just finished up with the Atchison Group, David Atchison, doing a FSMA Friday. And we're working with them. They're doing some work for us to clearly map where our standard fits against the expectations within. And with the expectation, there will be a few minor gaps that come out, very prescriptive elements. Those clearly identified, and then we're going to be able to roll them into as an additional module within our various standards. Hopefully that tells you about the good start for it anyways. I guess the next part of the discussion was, advice for people that are ready to go and what do you do. And the message has been clear from the FDA. The message we're putting forward is about the same. First of all, the FSMA is actually a pretty effective set of rules if done properly. So what we have seen is some focus on trying to meet the exemptions. So can I somehow exempt myself from the requirements of FSMA? But if you look at the intent and the reality of it, it's a good set of requirements. Don't worry about whether or not you're exempt. It's a good thing to do anyways. You don't want to try to skirt them. And don't wait to be perfect. Don't wait for the very last rule and every single interpretation of it to come up before you start. It's going to take a while. It's going to take, if you don't have a risk assessment or HACCP plan, it's going to take you well over a year to get this done. And when the FDA starts rolling out their investigations and their assessments of it, they're going to focus on where they feel the biggest gaps are. They're not going to go to the people who they feel ready to go and have all the materials in place. So for today, the focus I want to go on, primarily the preventative controls. I'm not going to touch produce safety rules. I know they're important to certain people, but those prescriptive on-farm produce rules I'm not going to touch. Foreign supplier verification I do want to cover, and with again the reminder, don't be led astray to think we don't have the same requirements for our domestic suppliers. So I would almost look at it from a supplier verification program and to not try to differentiate them too much. And we may touch a little bit on third-party accreditation and the aspects around that, but that really is something that although BRC is an accredited program, they're not directly linked.
Mm-hmm. Great. Thank you, John. So let's start to look at some of the specific topics. So there's a lot of talk today about migrating from HACCP to HARP-C. How does BRC align with FSMA in terms of preventive controls when it comes to HACCP and HARP-C?
And this already starts to show a little bit of differentiation where you are in the world. North America, there is a certain amount of, a certain viewpoint that HACCP only deals with critical control points. Therefore, if you've done your assessment, you have no critical control points, you have no HACCP. We're kind of throwing that terminology out and that idea out in moving to HARP-C. So someone who has a HACCP plan has a good chunk of HARP-C. The difference being how you define HACCP. In the BRC, we've defined it as the entire risk assessment and all of the mitigating strategies, including your prerequisite programs, including your critical control points, including your other control points that may not have been determined to be critical, but they're necessary to maintain a safe product or production environment. So in moving from HACCP to HARP-C, really what we're doing is saying it's not just the critical control points. It's about the entire risk. Look at your product. What are the risks, both incoming in the raw materials, in what we do in the process, and in the finished product itself that could manifest along their way to the consumer. You analyze that, you come out with a risk-based set of mitigation strategies. They may look like corrective programs. They may look like all kinds of the critical control points or anything in between. So in that movement, I think the best way to look at it is it's an expanded view. So instead of a focus on critical control points, it's really let's look at all the risks and all the mitigating strategies, not worrying about the label we put on the control.
And for folks that are BRC certified or planning or in the process of BRC certification, this isn't a surprise, right, John? Because BRC has always taken this sort of HARP-C approach of assessing risk and putting controls in place in that prevention focus. Is that a fair statement?
Absolutely, and when you look at the viewpoint, it's also HACCP as manifested in some parts was really okay. Here are critical limits. this is what we do to make sure we're inside those critical limits, and this is what we do if we're outside of those critical limits. So it's really about identifying a control zone and what do you do if you're outside of that control zone. Whereas HARP-C, as with BRC, really moves into more of a preventative mindset. How do we not even worry, how do we put ourselves in a situation where we're not going to get to those critical limits, or that we're not going to have other things, pest management issues, sanitation issues, anything other manifests itself, that we now have to enact our non-conforming product and controls, and we've got to do corrective action. So instead of just focusing on what do we do when we go outside of our critical limits? What are all the things we do that prevent us from getting into trouble in the first place? Which, as you're right, absolutely, that's the focus on BRC. It's not about a reactionary standard. It's about a prevention standard that keeps us where we need to be.
Yeah, and those are good points, since that's sort of the FSMA goal too, is that prevention. Let's move on to hazard analysis. So, how does BRC certification align with where FSMA preventive controls are going in terms of hazards and hazard analysis?
The vast majority, when we look at our hazard analysis, our big ones are chemical, physical, biological. So we're bang on with that. When we look at what FSMA said, and depending how you tease out what some of the commentary around the rules have been, the inclusion of consideration of radiological risks, probably under your chemical, maybe physical, doesn't matter where you put it, is not something that the BRC called out prescriptively. So there's one where we got the vast majority of it right, radiological not so much. So when you look at the classic risks, you got to tweak your program a little bit. Ask the question, is it an issue for us? Don't be afraid to say no, it's not, but you must ask the question and be able to defend the answer. One change, a big step that they brought in is the risk from food fraud, economic adulteration. And that's something we brought into our version 7, which has been out now it's been published for going on close to a year. We've been doing audits since July. We saw it as a big gap. Certainly it was a reaction to the horse meat issue in Europe 2 years ago. And we've seen a lot of, it's certainly raising a lot of questions. I won't, at this point, it's identifying that there's a big gap in our industry when we look at that, so it's a good match from that. And then from a food defense standpoint, it does, and the difference between food fraud and food defense, of course, being one's there to fool with the economics of the industry. The other one is to do harm to someone. And we've had that food defense expectation in there. But from those that have BRC, what we're going to do is put together a little more prescriptive direction that should really bring you above and beyond what's expected. FSMA has always looked at allergen cross-contact. BRC has as well, big focus on sanitation, as does BRC. Both those areas we really push validation. So not just have plans will work. So it's that additional step of not just having actions, but having actions that are proven to be effective. And supply chain management, huge for us. And again, that's something we started to move quite well in our version 6 for our food standard, doing certainly big time in 7, and that's that verification that you're purchasing from a known safe supplier, somebody who also has similar controls for food safety, and you verified those steps. So it is very, very close. It's going to be those little prescriptive things like radiological, where do we put that we're going to have to make sure we cover to get perfect.
Right. And as you said, very strong in supply chain management, which is a big component of FSMA. Let's talk about monitoring. Where does BRC align with FSMA in terms of the preventive controls monitoring requirements?
I'm sorry, Barb. I'm just going to catch up with that for a second. So from a monitoring standpoint, it's going to match pretty much identically. And what they've said in FSMA is you have to have a risk-based frequency for monitoring these things. Now, something like sanitation on a non-production area, that frequency of monitoring may be very infrequent, maybe every month, every 6 months, something longer than that. But you also have to be able to defend your decision-making and show that it works. And this is the additional step that we've always asked for within the BRC standard, not just pick a number and do it. Justify why you chose that number, or demonstrate why you chose that number, and show that it is effective. So, you know, when we say these preventative controls, and I'm going to keep with the simpler ones for now, we're going to go to pest control, and we say, okay, every 3 weeks we'll have a pest control technician come in. Great. You can say neither right nor wrong about the number, but it's is that best practice in the industry? Not typically in the food industry. And B, what are the results? Now, if the results come back that there's absolutely pest management is absolutely under control, that lends credence to being able to widen the gap between within the frequency. So it's not, as I say, when we see FSMA and the regulations that are coming in place, they're really starting to step towards this, and that's always been at the heart of BRC, not just what you do, why you do it, and show to me that it works. You know, and when you create those when you do that monitoring, obviously it has to be documented. We all know if it's not documented, it's not done. Prescriptively, you know, here's that little twist within FSMA. Records kept for 2 years. BRC has said shelf +1. FSMA is saying critical records kept for 2 years. So again, when we put that paper out and put our addendum into the standard to look at what FSMA requires, we're not going to change the BRC standard. We're going to have an additional point to click on to say, okay, here's what BRC wants, show me what FSMA does if it's different. And then, again, from a monitoring standpoint, something to remember as you're developing this, don't recreate everything. Don't simply say, okay, everything we do, and we now have to put a monitoring step in place. You probably have the majority of them, and it's in your internal audit program. And these should go hand in hand. Monitoring for many of the preventative controls should be connected or actually integrated into your internal audit program. And that's, again, going to bring the strength. I've been a big fan of using that through the standard, and that's going to really give your FSMA program or your entire food safety program a lot of robustness.
Great, thank you. Let's move on to corrective actions, John. How is BRC aligned with FSMA preventive controls when it comes to the corrective action requirements?
And again, that's something that over time we've seen a lot of growth in our training within BRC when it comes around corrective action, the expectations within the standard. They've gone beyond just a corrective action. And what we've taken the approach is you need to stop the situation. You need to assess how big it is, how bad it is, or how far it extends. And then you need to scope out the issue, first of all. Prevent it from getting worse, prevent it from rehappening, but you also need to come back and deal with the stuff that went wrong. And that's been a critical part of BRC. We move on to, and by the way, if it impacted product safety or legality, you better go do a root cause analysis afterwards as well. But within FSMA, the two key points they brought out that may not be in everyone's corrective action plans are, you know, and we're talking about corrective action to a non-conforming product. You have to assess the scope of the issue, and specifically FSMA requires you to understand, did it get out into commerce? So you're going to need, and remember, we've got to document everything we do in these cases, in these critical food safety issues. If we have non-conforming product, we need to identify how much, you know, has this issue been going on for a year, for a week, for a month, just happened? We need to identify that, and we also need to ask the question, you know, what's in commerce, what do we need to do about that? And then, you know, again, connect the dots of never say you've got non-conforming product without somewhere having a paper trail to show what happened to it and that it was properly taken care of, whether that be disposed of, whether it be sent to an alternate destination or alternate use or whatever happened to it. That should be consistent, and that should be the mindset we have throughout our organization. You know, it's like, for me, corrective action is like internal audit. It's not a QC thing. It's just the way we think. So when we document that something does not conform and it impacts the regulatory compliance or quality or safety of our product, I want to see a connected paper trail that brings me to what happened to the product. So from a BRC FSMA standpoint, again, we've covered this one very well. We're happy with it.
Great, thank you. Verification, big topic. There's been a lot of discussion on it in the comment period. When it comes to preventive controls verification, how do you see the alignment between BRC and what FSMA is asking for?
Oh, I'm going to put interesting on this one because I've read this section a number of times, and I think my conclusion is, yeah, I get it, but there's a language change, not just from BRC to FSMA, but from perhaps different parts of the food industry or different areas of the world of the food industry and what we put into what bucket. So under verification, it does require that and we're talking primarily our preventative controls here, so things we do to prevent food safety issues, that they are implemented and effective. So that's the next steps after the risk assessment. So we've identified what the risks are. We've identified the mitigating steps. We also have to make sure we implement them and they're effective. And that everyone should be thinking automatically, that's what I do internal audits for. Absolutely, that's great. So we've got that covered. Again, BRC is really strong in internal audit. It's not just a tick box. You need to have a lot of, those of you who do BRC know the push we put on having good internal auditors and doing this well, using it to your advantage. The interesting part for me is the term validation came up under verification and preventative controls. And I get where it's going. I mean, if you use verification in the less traditional sense, it's more just making sure it's going well. Validation does belong on there. Most cases, prerequisite programs, it's a bit of a debate as to whether or not validation can be used. Certainly pest control. I don't think you can validate a pest control program, not to the traditional sense. But BRC has always said, yes, every control mechanism needs to be validated. We've been a little more clear with our prerequisite programs in saying where it's designed to control a specific risk, then that should be validated. So my sanitation program controls cross-contamination of allergens when I flip between allergen-containing and non-containing products. I'm going to validate that specific element, which is, has this sanitation of this piece of equipment removed the allergens? That I can validate. Sanitation as a whole becomes a little tougher. You really need to focus on what is the prerequisite programs trying to manage on a specific basis. As I say, I mean, this for the most part, after the validation, the traditional validation step, it's all about internal audit. So I am very happy with how BRC managed that. The environmental monitoring, now this, again, where we urge a little bit of caution. BRC, as you know, is absolutely rigorous about what we call high-risk and high-care foods, which are ready to eat, but they're not all ready-to-eat foods. They're those certain categories, and we've gone just way beyond what GFSI expects for high-care and high-risk foods. FSMA tends to look, this is the one where they've kind of said, well, for certain types of food, you need to do something different. And they've said for ready-to-eat foods, you need to have an environmental monitoring program. Certainly, we'd expect that for high risk, but we wouldn't necessarily have it for every ready-to-eat food. So that'll be one of those addendum issues to just make sure everybody's right on top of this when that comes out.
Makes sense. Excuse me. Supplier management, right? So supply chain controls and supplier management specifically is very big in FSMA. It's a huge part of BRC, probably one of the areas where certainly we've seen a lot of focus. How is what BRC is doing in the area of supplier management helping companies get FSMA ready?
Yeah, this is something I take a lot of pride in with the BRC standard, that I think we're tough. Again, this is one where we're quite challenging on for sites, and it works. I mean, when you think of it, a significant portion of the risks inherent in our product come from the raw materials. Somebody's going to manage those risks. So either we buy stuff, and then we're bringing all kinds of risk into our operation that we now have to figure out a way to manage out, whether it be testing, test and hold, all these things because we don't have the confidence in our supply chain. Or we can push that barrier out a layer. We can say, you know what, let's make food safe, let's make stuff as safe as possible when it gets to our door, so that we can worry about what goes on in our operation, but we're not worried about what's coming in our door and how we have to manage that. So from a BRC perspective, we've taken a very risk-based approach. We certainly have said for low-risk suppliers, where it's not critical to our brand identity, it's not There's no great evidence of it being an issue. Even if it was an issue, we're going to process it out in our operation, things like that. For low-risk suppliers, traditional methods, questionnaires, things like that are fine. Now, traditional methods, C of A, doesn't work anymore, we have to remember, because FSMA says we need to ensure that our supply chain has a preventative control system. Because C of A doesn't say anything about that. Questionnaires do. Will questionnaires absolutely save your butt against? Certainly not certainly not for every instance. You're buying low-risk commodities. From a BRC standpoint, a questionnaire can satisfy. You may need to do a little bit of extra work to verify, some back check on that. But then we say for any high-risk ingredients, raw materials, packaging, anything where it's the failure of it, A, could be expected. We've done our risk analysis. We know the likelihood. Or B, severity. Either one of those adds up to a point where you know what, a questionnaire is not going to cover it. Then we expect a little more action. We expect a third-party audit, an independent assessment, a BRC certification, an SQF certification, any of the GFSI standards. They're going to at least cover off. We know traceability is done. We know HACCP is done. Our risk-based preventive controls, for the most part, are relatively covered. We'll need to identify those other areas. So I'm very, very confident from a BRC standpoint that our expectations for supplier management are certainly going to put you in, 99.9% of the way there when it comes to the expectations within FSMA.
Great, excellent, thank you. Where do current good manufacturing practices fit into all of this, and how does what FSMA is asking for align with BRC?
And what I'm going to focus on here primarily is what's changed. So, I don't want to go into GMPs and all of the expectations around there. It's really what to me stood out, and specifically maybe, okay, so if I've got BRC, that's covered off the majority of what was originally there and the majority of what's already, or the changes, the new material that's come out. So I'm happy with BRC, except a couple of points. And these are you can see what I'm doing throughout here. I'm really highlighting, you got BRC, you're great. I'm not going to explain all of FSMA. That's Mr. Atchison's and his group's job to do that, and he's far better at it. I really want to identify from what we've seen so far. These are the parts that we may, BRC, we're close, but we may not have done 100%. So the issues where we do this is really that food safety specialist, leader, whatever you want to call it. Within FSMA, it's called the qualified individual. And they really kind of use the language in two spots, qualified individual, and that really talks about everybody in the facility, meaning you need to know what your job is and how to do it. So this is training, absolutely. Verification of training, internal audit, that people know how to do their jobs. Those great things that really help our entire staff move forward. And my belief is you're really going to see that. Now, that's covered by BRC, because we expect, training to be done, job roles, responsibilities be tied to that training, and that it be managed appropriately for all staff. The more unique one is that qualified preventative control individual. And this is really the, typically it would have been our HACCP leader, our food safety manager, whatever it is. Remembering it can be more than one person within an organization. You can have 3 or 4 people that equal the qualified preventative control individual. But the key, again, with that is going to be managing their training and their background, their historical background. The FDA is leaning fairly heavily on training around this, both as, I need to know about preventative controls. I also need to know about my industry. I need to be able to demonstrate competency in this operation that we do somehow and maintaining that competency. So managing that is I think, going to be absolutely one of the most critical things. I think when we do start seeing FDA doing assessments against FSMA, within the first hour, your qualified preventative control individual is going to be the topic of conversation. And the quicker you can pull out and say, and that's my other position, don't wait for the FDA to tell you what to do. You know exactly what that person needs to know and be able to do in their competencies to lead your organization or your site when it comes to food safety. Build your case. Document that person or group of people, understand, and if there are holes missing, if nobody on site has a HACCP or HARP-C recognized training or good tested intermediate level training mechanism or course. Get it in place. You know that's going to be part of the definition and part of the defense you're going to put when the FDA comes in. You're going to say, here's our qualified PC individual, and this is why we think they're qualified. Here's the background. And then other ones when it comes to CGMPs, it's really about cross-contact allergens, making sure we're aware, we've done the risk assessment, we've called that out separately, and of course we manage risks that we identify.
Great. Let's talk about the FSVP. A lot of talk on this one here. How does BRC align with what FSMA is expecting in the area of the foreign supplier verification program?
Well, from a supplier verification versus foreign supplier verification, BRC doesn't have that demarcation. And personally, I don't see a demarcation other than foreign suppliers don't supply from the U.S., whereas domestic suppliers do. I don't, and I wouldn't even look at them as any different, but it is very clear within the foreign supplier verification program what do we need to do. And I think the difference is being access to records. The one difference between domestic supplier and a foreign supplier is a foreign supplier wouldn't necessarily have any proof of their HARP-C program. They wouldn't, by default, have proof of their HARP-C program on U.S. soil. And that's really a requirement, so that is probably the key difference. Importer of record, it could be you, it could be your supplier, it could be a broker that you use, it could be somebody who, whoever imports this and is the official importer of record needs to have proof in the U.S. that that manufacturer meets the rules within FSMA. Basically, HARP-C, traceability, those basic components. Now, we've already said BRC meets the majority of it. We know we're going to put that addendum to say, okay, you need to do these additional parts. So that could be certainly a basis for managing that program. So it's, if you're not the importer of record, but you are using foreign produced materials, it really is up to you. Strongly recommended that you step back and make sure somebody is meeting the expectations once it hits U.S. soil. Because that's something we have to, you have to remember, we got to take a look at FSMA from 2 points of view. We got to get ready. We got to get our site ready. We need to have a qualified individual. We need to have supplier verifications. We got to get our site ready. If our supply chain isn't ready, we're not going to be doing much at our site. We're ready, but we just don't have anything to do. So we have to look at ourselves. We also have to be very vocal to our supply chain. You better be ready, because if you're not, once the hammer starts dropping, we're going to find suppliers that are ready. And these are some of the options you have to get there. So foreign supplier verification program, it's really about if you've got offshore produced materials, or let's face it, probably everybody has offshore based materials in their supply chain somewhere, at least as a component. We're really going to have to make sure that that supply is going to be maintained. Steps in foreign supplier verification beyond certification or things like that BRC does not cover, none of the standards cover, is you have to verify the manufacturer's compliance, or the last step before it comes into the U.S., their compliance or issues within the FDA database. So we need to assess, are there any outstanding warnings, issues, recalls that the FDA has been involved in against this company. So we need to assess their compliance status with the USDA, with the FDA. And then we need to have that supplier approval program, and we need to show not only that we have a program, but again, go back to that demonstration that it works, demonstration that it's effective and implemented.
John, when you and I were preparing for today's event, we kind of had the discussion of one of the advantages with BRC is that you are a globally recognized scheme, right? You're not just a U.S.-based scheme. And can using foreign suppliers that are global and that are certified to BRC is going to allow FDA to maybe focus less on those? I know you don't want to put words in their mouth, but there's some advantages there, right?
Right, and you're absolutely right. And again, when we look at the globalness of our supply chain, having an understanding and a reach to a global basis is ultimately important. So and because BRC is so global, if you're using Turkish apricots in your operation, you need to know that you're going to be able to continue to get those. It's quite likely that the BRC does have approved sites on there. So at least we know what they do have, what they don't have. So if I'm importing a product, they've got their BRC certification. We know that, yes, they've got 90% of the stuff there. I need to make sure I've got coverage on this other 10% or ask them to do the FSMA addendum within the BRC standard during their next audit. Those types of things will really give you that extra level of confidence. The other side, the flip side is, most of you know that BRC has a public directory. We've got a listing of all of our certified organizations. So if you needed Turkish apricots, you can go on our directory and say, show me apricot suppliers in Turkey. And you can now start finding people who are already there. So if you've got a supplier that either is nowhere near being able to meet the expectations around the preventative controls, and you need to replace that supplier, or for whatever reason you need to look for an alternate supplier, maybe you've lost them, there is a source. So at least you're dealing with, I know somebody who's 90% of the way there, as opposed to I'm just going to buy on price and then figure out where the gap lies. So yeah, absolutely, that globalness is very important.
Great, thank you. There's been a lot of talk about the record keeping and being audit ready when it comes to FSMA. BRC has a strong audit program, so how is BRC certification aligning with FSMA and helping companies be audit ready all the time?
A couple of phases, and I know a lot of sites, a number of people that are on here. I mean, the advice when we do the training within BRC is as you prepare for your BRC audit, go in with the mindset of not being audited, but participating in an audit, or potentially even partially leading the audit. You know, when a BRC auditor comes in, we really encourage the site to not wait for every single question. Have the preparation. You know some of the things they're going to ask. You may not know every, of course, when they start doing their traceability challenge or their vertical audit, you don't know which document they're going to ask for. But a lot of the materials, the food safety team, the qualifications, I know my auditor's likely to look at that. I'm going to have it ready, and when we start talking about it, I'm not even going to wait for the question. I'm going to put my defense up on this is why our food safety team or our HACCP team is as good as it is. This is how we've determined, this is how we've defined it. So taking that same approach, so hopefully the BRC audit methodology is going to really put you in a good position. Because you've got to remember, FDA auditors, this is new to them too. There will be a certain amount of them coming in, learning exactly how to assess this, what to assess. When you take that step forward and really take the lead and where possible, provide them with, this is how we've defined preventative, this is how we've done our risk assessment. These are our risk, preventative actions. These are preventative controls. This is how we've defined our qualified individual. Here's all the documentation to support that. Here's the verification of it. So it's that practice, and the practice beyond checklist, which BRC is, everybody knows BRC is a good active audit. It's a process audit that really follows the process as opposed to just ticking a bunch of boxes. So we think that's going to really give you a leg up on preparedness and being able to react as this audit unfolds within it. Our strength of our internal audit expectations, again, that's my number one thing. If when you're good at internal audits, when you drive that and take it beyond just food safety, it's quite great. It's absolutely great how much strength that gives your overall organization and the path you go down. The other side of it, when you talk about this audit ready every time, we've had unannounced audit options for over I think it's 5 years now. With our version 6, we brought in the unannounced option. We have over 1,000 sites now that are annually audited unannounced, and that is that whole other mindset. And what we found what we did is we did a big survey, because this was a change, going from announced to unannounced audits. Everybody kind of saw it coming, thought it was, there was always the question, is it better or worse? And we've done a survey. Once we got over 1,000 sites, we went out and surveyed all those sites and really tried to find out what this did for you. And the study we came back with was interesting in that it allayed a lot of the fears. People thought going in, you know, I'm going to fail, I'm going to get worse grades, it's going to be a bad audit, it's going to be too long, too short, everything else. People aren't going to be there able to answer the auditor's questions. What we found in the study, grades didn't really change. Numbers of nonconformities didn't change. Types, there's a little more emphasis on the physical condition stuff. Sites said, you know what, it was just as good of an audit. Auditors said it was just as capable of an audit. Yes, we refocused a little bit. Certainly we rescheduled things. But unannounced was, you know, from a getting the audit done standpoint, the results of the audit, it wasn't a significant change. What they did report back, the one significant change that pretty consistently came back, they said the culture of organization saw a dramatic shift in that more and more people within the organization took ownership of food safety. So instead of the QA manager, hey, that audit's coming up next month, make sure you're ready, the entire site started to take on, I'm going to make sure we do well on that audit. Don't know when it is, don't know who's going to be here, but if I'm here, I'm going to really do my, you know, be able to support this properly. And that whole shift towards losing the polish the week before and getting good and knowing you're good every day. So I think that type of preparation, those two things, just the nature of the BRC audit, the strength of the internal audit program, and that unannounced concept that really has, as it grows and grows, is shifting preparatives, shifting mindset, shifting the culture, is going to make a huge difference. So it's that preparation and practice. And of course, BRC has always had, because we've been based in due diligence, in you know, making sure you can justify, you can show that you did the best to protect your consumers and customers and yourselves, that we've always had a strong record-keeping requirement. Show proof that it works. So I think, you know, for BRC certification, especially, you know, 1 year, let's face it, you did a lot of work and you're going to get better next year. So again, that's that urge to not put it off, not wait. BRC certification, you know, at the end of next year, just before the rules come into play, it's going to get you okay. Companies that have been BRC for a couple of years, they know how good it's gotten them and where it brings them. So I would say, you know, preparation, yeah, I think that audit ready all the time has been something we've brought forward.
Mm-hmm. Great, thank you. Excuse me. You mentioned earlier that BRC is working with the Atchison Group. Can you tell us a little bit about what scheme changes might be being made or planned to better align in FSMA in those few areas where there are some gaps?
Yes, absolutely, and you know, we're relying heavily on the folks from the Atchison Group to really make sure we've got this lined up. We've done some analysis, we've looked at it, we're starting to build the case, but we've wanted to make sure we've got that confidence that someone like the Atchison Group brings to us. So they're in the process of getting that gap analysis and mapping built for us. So what do we do with that? That in itself as raw data is not that helpful. Kind of to give you a view of where we're going with FSMA. And remembering, we do have our food standard. It just came out about 6 months ago. We also have our storage and distribution standard. We've got our agents and brokers, and we've got our retail. And it's touching on all of them. So although I'll primarily talk about what we're going to do with our food standard, it's going to be equally reflected in all of our standards. So once we get that gap analysis, we're going to have, let's say, a page of these things aren't completely covered in BRC. We're going to build an addendum into the standard. So from an electronic standpoint, obviously a hard copy is not quite going to look the same, but from the electronic copy that you're going to get off Participate, you're going to be able to go to HACCP team leader. Here's the requirement BRC has where they have to demonstrate competency, and then there's going to be a tab on that says FSMA. You'll click on the tab, and it'll show the difference. What do you need to do additional? Well, we've got this thing called qualified TC individual. Strongly recommend, for example, that they have a HARC-C training course or whatever expectations are in place in addition. You know, when you go to your risk assessment within your HACCP plan, you're going to click on the risk assessment, and it's going to say, you know, typically you're going to cover biological, chemical, physical. Allergens go into one of them. FSMA tab, let's see, right, got to make sure I at least assess against radiological, and either in HACCP or outside of my HACCP plan, I also have to cover off food fraud, food defense, things like that from a risk assessment standpoint. So we're going to not add it to necessarily, but we're going to integrate beside so that you'll be able to see in essentially one document, what do I need, where does BRC get me 90% of the way there? Here's the recommendation on the additional steps to take beyond that to satisfy FSMA. We are in the process of developing a HARPC course. Again, we're trying to, it is very similar to HACCP, depending what your background in HACCP is and whether or not you focus purely on CCPs or not. So that is going to come out, and it'll be tied to the BRC standards. So HARPC from a BRC, kind of mesh the two together, because what we don't want you to do is run a BRC program and then have a parallel FSMA or HARPC or PC program and just keep adding these layers that talk about similar things but they don't relate. We want to make sure you've got a singular program that satisfies everything. And of course, like we do, we just came out with version 7 of the food standard this year. As we do with every version, or every time something significant happens around the world, and FSMA is pretty significant, excuse me, we look at, does that integrate into the standard as a whole? Is it a good enough idea? And right now, as we start to assess our storage and distribution standard, that's something that instead of addendum, if it's if it's a good thing to do, regardless of where you are, it's going in the standard. So we certainly embrace things where someone else comes up with a better idea or more effective way to manage food safety risk. It only makes sense just to integrate it further into the standard.
Great, thank you. Now, it's all about having the best food safety program in place, and FSMA's taking U.S. food safety to a new level, but it's not the end-all. Do you see gaps in FSMA when it comes to having a solid food safety program that are actually filled by BRC?
Yeah, and that's a very valid point, Barb. I mean, and that's something we have to remember, that it's not take one step forward with the other. It's in combination. Where does this get us? BRC, we've only got the one version of standard, one level of standard, and it includes safety, regulatory compliance, and quality. Now, people sometimes tend to step back and say, no, wait, we're in charge of quality. We're okay. Definitions are important. So BRC has defined quality as meeting customer expectations or meeting your specifications. So whether they're big apples or small apples, that's not what we're talking about from a quality standpoint. What we are talking about is if your customer is buying has agreed to purchase medium-sized apples, you deliver medium-sized apples consistently and keep that customer happy. So meeting customer specifications, customer satisfaction, that's been integral to the BRC. So that brings us, that's the business side of it. Regulatory, we got to meet FSMA, but let's get some business going as well, and I think the quality aspects really drive towards that. From a traceability standpoint, that's something I think we're rigor. I think first one step up, one step down is pretty much been the industry norm for quite a while. We're doing some work with some voluntary modules for the food standard on further traceability, especially within the meat industry, in areas where it's let's face it, in Europe, meat traceability beyond one step down is really important. It's a high visibility issue, so it is something that we've developed to be able to go further than that. And the rigor in the traceability, I guess, is the other thing. So, often early sites in the standard, when you talk about a traceability challenge, their question is, well, how accurate do we have to be? And of course, within BRC, because we're a risk-based standard, the answer is always, no. You tell me how accurate you're going to be. You probably ask your accountant to see how much you're okay with losing, not knowing where it went. But really pushing back on that concept of you determine, but then you justify why, prove that it works is the second step. So that additional step, and we've been quite strong in traceability. And again, that drive for, or the depth within our hazard analysis. Wherever we've used things based on risk or done risk assessments or hazard assessments, BRC has always been taking the point of it's not just about reacting when it happens. FSMA, we brought in the preventative control, so it's not even about trying to get out in front of it. BRC uses it to say, you know what, why don't you even use it to get better? Where there's value to it, where you can see the justification, you need to ask that question. How can I use risk assessment to identify areas where I'm static, and if I could improve, we'd be a better business, stronger business, we're going to gain over the competition, whatever outcome you desire from it. So, yeah, BRC does bring a fair bit beyond, and typically on the business side, what FSMA is bringing to the table.
Great, thank you. So now, John, for those companies that are already certified or are planning to be certified, what are some of the things that you think that they should be doing now so that they are compliant on day one?
The first one, if you're not certified in BRC, and honestly, if you're not certified to a GFSI standard or similar program, and once you are, remember, that's 90% or 80%, or depending on the program, it's a good portion of the way there. The nice thing about, when I ask people about the BRC, especially people who've done it for the first time, how did you like this? How did the standard work for you? And the very typical answer was, well, reading the standard, I got a very clear picture of what I need to do. There was no doubt in my mind. I didn't always like it. Sometimes it was pretty hard, but I got a very clear picture of reading the standard on what to do. So when you think of, I need to get ready for FSMA, you can download the 800-page FSMA document that was written by, the whole boatload of lawyers, and try to figure that out. And I would strongly recommend, getting Atchison's newsletters, things like that are going to help you along the way. Come into FSMA Fridays, get that additional information. But you take a document like the BRC standard, that's going to bring you 90% of the way there. And people are saying, you know what, I get it. It leads me down to where I need to go. It's a good functional system. Pick one or the other. I strongly recommend efficiency. If somebody's going to guide you on how to get to where you need to be, go with that guidance. And then once you're at certification level, keep on top of the discussions coming out around, especially on the official discussions and commentary coming out of as they roll out FSMA. You will see a lot of hints coming out in that, so that's going to be very important. We are going to, watch for those additional updates, changes, those new definitions. Once you're already certified, as the BRC, we're going to keep our standard updated. We're going to keep materials coming out about FSMA for as long as necessary until we're comfortable that we're absolutely good where we need to be. From the already certified, biggest steps, that qualified individual, don't wait. It's, you know what you need to do to build that qualified individual, start doing it. Don't wait till it's too late or you have to have corrective action, because it may take a while. Don't forget about redundancy. BRC makes, remember that, within BRC we always look for redundancy in critical individuals. Make sure you've got that built into your organization as well. Build your case for your qualified individual. You determine what a qualified individual is and then build it. Don't wait for somebody to come in and try to figure out what's good for you. And again, the biggest step, don't forget your supply chain. Yeah, you've got to get yourself ready. You better be reminding your supply chain, let's go back to change the millennium. Remember the 2000, we had to beat up all our suppliers to make sure they're not going to completely implode when the clocks changed to the year 2000 and computers all crash. We need to kind of go through that same exercise of making sure that our supply chain is safe. So we're good. We need to make sure everybody else is going to be good equally.
Great, thank you. And we're going to throw one more question out to you, John, before we open it up for questions from our audience and then provide some more information and get to our optional demo. There's been a lot of talk about automation when it comes to GFSI and food safety programs in general, and certainly FSMA. Where do you see the role of technology?
It's not going to solve problems for us. It's not going to. But look at what technology has brought us so far. It's going to make things a lot more efficient, more effective. It's going to let us focus where we really need to focus. So from a technology standpoint, when it comes to BRC compliance, we've seen this when it comes to FDA or FSMA compliance. There's a lot of records. There's a huge amount of records. Because we're not only talking about ourselves now, we're talking about being able to evaluate our supply chain or have information about our supply chain. It's just for many, many sites, it's getting beyond something that could be manually managed. You know, paper backups don't exist. They're all stuck in a storeroom somewhere, and if something, and I was at a plant where we lost tons of records because there was a water leak and we didn't notice, and they all went moldy, and we had to throw, and there was no backup. So, you know, when you look at electronic systems, there's the safety of them. They are so easy to have a second copy off-site where we can get it. There's the searchability of it. We can get what we need to get when we need to. We don't have to spend days getting through it. There's the, you know, if I'm going to hire people, I really don't want to hire them to spend time creating paper records and managing paper records. I want them focused on food safety. So efficiency or I guess maybe efficacy of the outcome is going to be significantly better. So technology, I think we have to understand it. We have to put it to its best use so that it can let us get on with our job and let it do the work it can. And maybe going beyond just a simple, you know, just a simple record of who got trained isn't really enough. How about if, you know, it's a computer, they can do these things. How about you tell me when somebody's missing or when somebody's coming up due, or, you know, put the alert out that it's time to do a training course because we've got people that are going to expire in their training in next month. So we needed to take over those mundane tasks of tracking, of planning, of anticipating, beyond just the record keeping. So when we talk about technology, you know, it's not a scanner anymore. It's really, there's some intelligence behind these systems and that we need to embrace and bring forward. Also, you know, the managing not only internal things like training, but our supply chain. So if I've got a BRC certificate and I know, you know, I've verified it on the directory and I know that it's going to come due, or I need a kosher certificate or something like that, I shouldn't be going through lists of paper every month trying to figure out what I need to get. It should be the automation, or the notification should just go out. I shouldn't, again, it's not a value add when I'm doing all of the clerical work that a computer could easily do. I can have somebody actually focusing on food safety. Yeah, so hopefully, yeah, it's great. It's important. Companies that have done well with good systems, it's absolutely amazing to go through and see how well they manage things.
Great, thank you. Now what we're going to do now, I'm going to come out of full screen, and everybody now should be able to see on the bottom the Q&A tab. So, excuse me, what you need to do to submit your question is just go to the Q&A tab on the lower right, enter your question, and hit send. And while we're waiting for some of those questions to queue up, I'll give you some additional information. For more information on BRC, you can go to their website at brcglobalstandards.com, and you can also find information there to register for upcoming events, such as the CBATP conference in Europe, the Americas Conference, and Food Safety Americas. You can see the dates up here on the screen, and all the information that you need to register is on the BRC site. We hope that we see most of you at the Food Safety Consortium. You'll be able to meet the GFSI leaders there. There's plenary sessions and case studies and front-of-mind topics, workshops and training sessions. SafetyChain will be doing a session with the Atchison Group on actionable data for FSMA compliance. And if you registered for this webinar and enter the code webinar, you can get a 10% discount on your registration. This is Food Safety Tech's event, and we hope that many of you are able to join us for that event. SafetyChain has a technology tool which helps you with all of your regulatory FSMA and GFSI compliance and audit readiness needs. We're going to take some questions for John, and we hope that you can stay on to see a high-level demo where we'll talk about how we help you manage your supplier compliance programs. Manage, monitor, and verify your food safety, HACCP, and HARPC and other food safety plans with abilities to define and auto-schedule tasks, get those real-time analysis to requirements and those real-time non-conformance alerts for timely CAPA generation and document. We'll show you how all documents and records are uploaded to a central repository for reporting and continuous improvement, and how we can tie records to BRC standard codes and FSMA food safety plan sections for on-demand audit readiness. So we'll be starting that in just a few minutes, but with that, let's see if we've got some questions from our from our audience. And boy, we're just going to start with the a biggie here for you, John. Excuse me. What do you see as the main differences between BRC and the SQF scheme?
Yeah, funnily enough, I've never heard that question before.
We did that one on the last webinar too. So there you go.
It's fair. No, that's a very valid, very fair question. And to be honest, we are both benchmarked to the GFSI expectations for food safety. So from a basic food safety expectation, we cover the same things. Once you get beyond the basic food safeties, you tend to see a little bit of differentiation. SQF's an excellent program. We do things a little bit differently. SQF has two levels, essentially, that are GFSI compliant. Level 2 covers off the food safety expectations within GFSI. Level 3 adds a quality component to it, so they kind of break it up into a two-step, whereas BRC only has one. BRC has individual standards, so we've got one if you make packaging, if you're logistics, if you're a retailer, if you are a broker, if you're a food manufacturer. So we've got individual standards created specifically for those segments of the industry. SQF has a single document that has a core for everybody, and then, depending what you do, you take the other section. You can ignore some sections. So fairly similar. It's just built a little differently. The way we're written is probably the biggest difference. And what I explain to people, when you're looking at BRC SQF, it's like looking at two different cars. There is no better. This one I like. I like the way it feels, it looks, it works. I like the little bits and pieces that it has. And that's really how you need to kind of assess these things. Best way to assess, we both have public listings on our websites of certified suppliers. Call one of them. All the contact information's there. Find somebody in our country or in our neighborhood that makes a similar product, or maybe not because they're a competitor, and ask them, how was it? Was it worthwhile? What were the good parts? What were the bad parts? Knowing that they're probably going to be biased towards what they did, but at least get kind of a grasp. The other thing, I don't recommend getting both standards and reading them. You're going to spend weeks trying with them, and you'll get a lot of headaches. Get some specific sessions. Go to management commitment, go to objectives, go to HACCP team leader. Pick a very specific element and then compare the two things that are important to you. And that's probably better than trying to read the whole standard. It's going to be more concise. The other differences, BRC is, I think at this point it's far more global. And as I had mentioned in some things like high-risk foods, we have some very rigorous prescriptive requirements specifically designed to have segregation and prevent cross-contact of pathogens back into processed foods. So depending on your industry segment, it may be a more rigorous standard or not in some cases.
Mm-hmm. Great, thank you. Aubrey is asking, if you're exempt from a supply chain program because you're exempt from preventive controls, how does BRC feel about this? And if you choose to not do a supply chain program because of that exemption, how would you be scored on your BRC audit?
I'm going to just put the BRC, but the first part of it, I'm going to just put the BRC part aside of it. As I said in the beginning, I think a lot of this is just good food safety. Supplier approval, from a business standpoint, why on earth, how could you ever justify not knowing something about your suppliers, at least your critical suppliers? The risks you're taking and the cost you're invoking into your organization. If I'm just going to buy on the open market, that means I have no comprehension whether the risks have been managed. I now have to test all of these risks out. So if I'm buying raspberries from just some broker to put on to use in my bakery, I have no idea about pesticide residue. I got to test it before I use them. I have no idea about pathogens. If they're going on raw, I need to do pathogen testing before. So, it's the cost to my organization to do no supply approval is pretty big. The risk is certainly significant. And then you get into, so from as I said in the beginning, don't pay any attention to can I get exempt? Because if, you you shouldn't be sitting and saying, wow, now I don't have to have a supplier approval program. Now I don't have to have risk controls in my organization. Wow, I should talk to my lawyer. I'm not a fan of it. I get the exemptions from a cost standpoint. Certainly from a time basis, it may take smaller organizations a lot longer to get things built and in place. To build the skill set to be able to do these things. So from it's going to take us longer, go for it. I get it. Do it right the first time. But from I don't have to do food safety because I got an exemption. There's no way I would be a supporter of that. And now I forgot the second half of the question. I should have written that down. How does BRC score it? You have to have a supplier approval program to get BRC certified. If you don't get a certificate. So from a fact that you can come back and say, well, in the country I produce, I'm exempt from that regulation. BRC has a set of standards in addition to which you need to meet regulations of the country you're selling to or working in. So BRC says you have to have a supplier approval program. If you came and said, well, FDA said I'm exempt, that's great. You're good for FDA, you're not good for BRC. So it would simply not work.
Great. Another question from TD. How can I rely on BRC to meet the year one deadline? It sounds like some changes might be coming too late. I think we have to go back to that BRC, even as it is today, has you 90% of the way there or more. Do you want to address this, John?
Yep. No problem. So, remember, year one deadline is not going to mean there's going to be an FDA inspector in every facility on that first day of, it's just not going to happen. They are going to deploy where the biggest food safety risks are. And again, if people have certification to a GFSI program, you're not going to be seen as one of the higher risks. That doesn't mean you're not going to get an FDA inspection. You will, but my expectation is that frequency is going to be significantly less, and you're probably going to be put in that we're going to deal with them a little bit later pile. So from a things to do, it's going to if you do not have a HACCP program, if you don't have a supplier approval program, it's going to take you well over a year to get there, regardless of what mechanism you use. So, BRC won't be perfectly compliant next week. No, we're not. So don't do anything for another week. Don't do that. Get 90%, as you said, Mark, get 90% of the way there. Before you're finished that leg of it, we're going to have all the other parts lined up for you to start putting in place. And, it's going to take a certain amount of time to get there, regardless of which tool you use. So don't say, well, I'm going to wait for a better tool. You need to get going last week.
And FDA has said that if you are BRC certified or certified to a GFSI scheme, that is one of the best strategies to get you almost where you need, as opposed to not having it, and you might only be 30% of where you need to be. So this is a tool to get you as far ahead, and then you just have to deal with the gaps. Let's see here. Time for one or two more. Sheila has an interesting question. So we're having trouble getting brokers to reveal who their suppliers are. They tell us this is proprietary because they don't want us going to them directly. How will this meet the BRC and then I guess even the FSMA FSVP standard if they're not going to give us the information? This goes back to importer of record, does it not?
Yeah, I was talking to a couple of fairly large retailers yesterday, as a matter of fact, about this. It's an easy answer. It's not going to meet either FSMA or BRC. So, as I said, when you have to start looking at your supply chain, if you've got a broker that says, we're not going to reveal any information about your supplier, they're gone. They are no longer your supplier. And those that are learning this are going to be the brokers that are successful. The brokers that are saying, it's proprietary. Let's face it, it's not proprietary. There's this Google thing that if you want granulated garlic in 5-pound packages, Google it. You can find the supplier of it. You don't need to, your brokers are great. They provide a service. They get us stuff that it would be a lot of time and effort and difficulty for us to get. They've got the connections. They've got the sources. They don't have any magic. If we knew where, and we do know when the stuff arrives at our door, generally, it's got a C of A. It's got a manufacturer's logo on it. We know where it came from. So it really isn't a mystery We like our brokers because they do a good service for us, and they give us efficiency, and they get us things that maybe we can't get in the sizes we'd like to get or at the price point we'd like to get. So they're good. But certainly, if a broker comes and says, you know, I'm not going to tell you who it is, you can't use them. So move on. Find another broker that understands the Food Safety Modernization Act. I mean, that's the easiest question. Call your broker and say, okay, tell me what you know of what you're doing to prepare for FSMA. And if they say what, start looking for another broker.
There you go. We'll take one more question, and then we'll go on to our demo. Andrea is asking, we're a manufacturer in Canada, and we are BRC certified. We export product into the U.S. for further distribution to U.S. customers from a third-party warehouse. How does FSMA affect us?
It does. Plain and simple, all the rules apply. The only difference is if you're not in the U.S., you have to remember you are not the one that satisfies FSMA. It's the importer of record, the entity in the United States that is legally responsible or puts their name under importer of record on that line. So what you can do is make life easy for the companies that are the importers of records. First thing you do is you pony up your BRC certificate and say, look, I've got that. And oh, by the way, you know, in a few months I did the addendum for FSMA, so you've got all that information. Their job is to collect evidence, the records, the documentation on U.S. soil that you meet FSMA requirements, right? It's kind of like a BRC audit. The auditor's job is to collect proof that you meet the standard. Well, the importer of records job is to collect proof that you meet FSMA. And they're going to want suppliers who say, oh, by the way, here's the whole envelope of stuff that show that you're going to need for FSMA compliance. They're going to like those suppliers better than the ones that say, oh, well, yeah, we're planning on doing our audit, but we can't, you know, we haven't got a CV yet, and things like that. Make your customer's life easy. It's up to them to have the proof. It's up to you to supply the proof. You know what proof they're going to need. So start, again, building that package for them so that we can do efficient business.
Great. Thank you, John, and thanks, everybody, for all of your questions. This has been very, very informative, and we're so excited that you were able to join us today. And I'd like to thank everybody else for joining us as well. What we're going to do now is introduce Dave Detweiler. Dave is the Director of Technical Solutions for SafetyChain, and we invite everybody to stay on for an optional demo of SafetyChain solutions and how we can help you automate compliance and audit readiness for FSMA and GFSI and your other food safety programs. And we'll take a few questions after this. And if you're leaving us now, thank you. We hope you found this informative. If not, we'll come back to you at the end of the demonstration. And with that, I'm very excited to introduce Dave and John. Thank you so much.
Perfect. Thanks. Thanks, Barbara, and thanks, John, for the great presentation there. And as Barbara mentioned, what I think we're going to do here is we'll just quickly walk through the actual an actual presentation here of SafetyChain. And what I'm going to do is actually make sure that you have this in full screen and that I can actually move the slides through full screen.
When you get in full screen, all you have to do is click anywhere on the slide, and then you can use your page down.
Sure, there we go. So the SafetyChain for food is a software as a service platform, right? And what you'll see as I walk you through some of these screenshots should align very well with the conversation that we just had around audit readiness. The system has been designed to help you the whole outline of say what you do what you say, and make sure it's documented. You'll see several modules going across left to right across the screen here. We'll talk a little bit about supplier compliance, and we'll talk about that foreign supplier verification. We'll talk about the assistance that you can use the system around capturing HACCP and HARP-C information. Obviously, we touched on some quality information as well, and then near and dear to our heart, how the system might help you with FSMA, as well as with passing your BRC audits, right? I think a big portion that comes out of this and how the system was designed and what our SaaS delivery model, our software as a service delivery model allows us to do is really take you from that reactionary point and become preventative, right? And that's the goal of it. So a couple areas that we'll walk through in the demonstration here quickly. We'll talk about the vendor approval programs, right? We'll talk about HACCP and HARPC, like I said, as well as the FSQA and on-demand readiness. So the first bullet point here, right? Let's talk a little bit about the approval programs and supply chain controls, right? First shot that you're seeing here, first screenshot of the system, as many of you probably have today, existing in an Excel spreadsheet, in a shared drive, in some kind of document, you have a supply list, right? A supplier list. You'll notice a couple things very quickly, hopefully, on this screenshot, right? The country of that supplier, obviously very quick. We talked about having foreign suppliers and what that might mean. I think John did a great job of talking about it's not just foreign suppliers, right? It's truly all of your suppliers. But the idea and the ability to start to identify these suppliers in your supply chain is obviously vitally important. And what you're seeing here is my approved supplier list. Also important, as many of you deal with today, is the ability to really deal with the complexity of these supplier lists, right? There's typically some type of a hierarchy, right? There's different documents you need for, in this example, maybe even different locations, right? Or different types of products that you're getting from a supplier. So you have that supplier at the highest level. You have certain documents that you need to track and house in regard to that supplier. But in addition to that, if that supplier has multiple locations, you need to also have certain documents on those locations. And that's what this is accentuating here, right? So the idea you start, you have an approved supplier list, right? The idea you can have these parent-child relationships. You can very quickly search and filter these lists as well to find the information quickly. You can group these suppliers together, whether it's a packaging supplier versus an ingredient supplier versus, a chemical supplier, whatever that might be. As well as associating risk levels with these suppliers within these lists. So if we take it one step maybe backwards, right? So I started off saying, hey, you have an approved supplier list. Well, a lot of our conversation, especially around FSMA and also around BRC, is what does that vendor approval program look like? And what the SafetyChain solution allows you to do is put an actual approval program in place. What you're seeing here on your screen right now is a series of tasks that you might generate out to suppliers. Hey, I need you to complete a questionnaire. Hey, I need your HACCP plan document or your HACCP certificate or your third-party audit certificate, right? Your own BRC certificate from that supplier. The idea here is this is what you might look at as a list of tasks to approve a specific supplier. And you'll see up top here, this is my new supplier onboarding, as we call it here at SafetyChain, campaign, which is made up of a series of tasks. I will make one comment here. It is important to note, we also talked a little bit about just generating out annual questionnaires today. The idea that I'm giving you this example as a series of tasks in our solution, but understand that customers will use this solution today to generate out an annual questionnaire, right? One task to your suppliers, to a group of suppliers, to a set of suppliers that need to complete maybe just an annual questionnaire, and that's something else that this tool can be used for. This would be your view, everybody on the screen here today or on the webinar here today. This might be what you look at, where you're starting to track and monitor the status of these suppliers. Well, what does your supplier see? They actually can have their own little access point, right? Their own little access point to a supplier portal where they can then complete those tasks that you're assigning them. Again, software as a service, the idea that this is available globally. We talk about foreign suppliers, we talk about domestic suppliers. This is now a tool that you can make available for those suppliers to interact with you, capture that information. And what you're seeing on this screen here is what a supplier might see. In our example, this supplier has received a set of tasks. Those tasks need to be completed. Again, as you saw on that prior screen, you can obviously track and monitor these tasks through that completion point, right? So let's take it one step further. Now you have approved suppliers in the system. You don't just have an approved supplier list. You're now on the hook for managing and maintaining it, right? The first step is making sure that they're approved and they properly go through your approval mechanisms and tasks. The second part of this is, hey, now I need to manage these ongoing, right? You have a series of documents. We have customers, 20, 25 different documents you're tracking at that supplier level. And again, remember, that might vary depending on the location of that supplier. So you're talking about things like a certificate of insurance, like a third-party audit, right? Those audit certificates, they come up on expiration. And what our system will do is actually put these documents under management. It'll actually create and reference historical documents within here, but also, more importantly, it provides the ability to generate out notification and for you to report against these documents. Are there any expired documents? The system can even remind you of that. Hey, by the way, supplier ABC's certificate of insurance is coming up on being due, right? Giving, again, the suppliers an avenue of where they can interact, as we talked about with a portal, but also then giving you the tools to manage and maintain this ongoing document, just a lot of documents you need to manage, right? A lot of stacks of paper that you might be looking at today, or even Excel spreadsheets. Nice that there's color coding to quickly identify. Here you're seeing yellow, upcoming on being due, red is past due. So trying to help very quickly, as we talked about, not be reactionary, but be preventative, right? How about instead of telling me the documents that have expired, telling me the ones that are coming up on expiration, right? So as I take this one step further and we talk about suppliers, I think one of the great things that was mentioned as we went through the webinar today was making sure your suppliers maintain to your standards. And that doesn't just come up with you going through an approval process. Many customers of ours today are actually going out and doing supplier audits, right? Looking through those supplier facilities, actually responding back to those suppliers with summary reports, identifying NCRs and corrective actions that you would like them to follow up on. What you're seeing here is actually the SafetyChain mobile application. And I'm going to show you several other screenshots of this. But what this has enabled is our customers to go places and actually do these audits quickly, right, with a device, a tablet. The idea you can walk out, you can create your answers, you can enter in comments, you can do scoring, you can do averages here. You can actually create, on the back end of this, an actual summary report. We've talked to many customers who haven't used technology like this before in the past, and it'll take them days, if not weeks, to really start to aggregate that audit together and produce back an efficient summary report. And this is the mobile device where you can actually walk through. You can do the grading or scoring as we talked about. In some cases and instances, where it's applicable and maybe more importantly appropriate, you can even take direct observation. The idea that you can take a photograph. We have many customers out in the produce industry that are doing ranch inspections and facility inspections and things like that. But the idea that this tool allows you to take those direct observations as well, right? Take it one step further. Once that's all done, wouldn't it be nice to be able to generate a notification out to someone? So as you complete those audits, as you may find a nonconformance, and the example that you're seeing here is actually of a ranch inspection where you went through a facility maybe, and you want to generate back that there wasn't adequate screening or protection, right? That was provided against pests, as you're seeing here, right? So the idea that now the system can also be a notification tool. Just like we talked about the system being preventative around upcoming documents on expiring, the idea that as you identify these NCRs or corrective actions, it's very important to communicate, right? Communicate, generate notifications, all built into the SafetyChain application. And then lastly, that ability to really start to track and monitor those open NCRs, corrective actions, preventative actions that we all talk about, right? The ability for you very quickly to come into our system and say, hey, are there any outstanding corrective actions? And I'll show you some screenshots about that here in a moment. But this is just an example of a summary, right, within our system, something that you can look at. How did that supplier do? It's also now starting to give you that data, or that information, I should say. We're taking that data and making it information, right? Making it accessible to you as an organization, so you can start to use all of this to keep track of your suppliers, right? Are they within document compliance? Did they pass my supplier approval program for sure? Are they now maintaining their documents appropriately? Are they following up on my audits? What was their audit score? All of that information now can become quite readily accessible and also allow you to make some very smart decisions in regard to your supply chain, right? So identifying those risks, following up on those, and making sure they're being followed up on by your suppliers, right? So I'm going to take it just one step further. Within our conversation, we talked a little bit about HACCP and HARP-C and the ability to, generate and verify tasks and so forth, and non-conformance alerts and corrective actions here as well. So let's take a look at a couple of these. And I think it was important. I heard a really great term, right? There's a frequency of monitoring, right? Monitoring, if I say that properly. Within our system, we have something that we call FSQA, process automation. You're going to have a certain set of tasks that just need to occur, right? And they're going to occur on a regular frequency. What you're seeing here is an example of 2 CTP tasks, right? A sanitizing task as well as a metal detecting task. You can also notice on the screen that there are time intervals that these things need to occur. What our system does is it allows these tasks, and I use the term tasks. Many of you may be saying, well, what does that really mean? It's that paper-based form that you're using today, right? It's that form that you're expecting your person on the floor to go do that form and complete that form. And what our system will actually do is generate those forms out for completion. So within our system, it will generate out these tasks. It will also allow you to come back into the system to verify and very quickly look and see and make sure that all of your tasks and forms have been completed. If we walk through this example, the idea that these tasks, these forms, can then be generated out to an end user. Just like we talked about the ability of you to walk through mobily and do a supplier audit, think of you on the floor in your facility, doing away with those clipboards, doing away with those pieces of paper, and now actually starting to capture this data electronically. There's a couple of things that automatically happen here, right? Unalterable date and time stamp, right? The support of electronic signature. But also, when we talk about reaction versus prevention, when you talk about that, what we're trying to do with this software and what our customers will talk about being done with this software is really moving it up into the hands of the end user. What you're seeing here on your screen right now is actually a real-time verification task against my fresh rinse, right? The idea that real-time, as an end user enters in a data point, in this case, that PAA test, as they enter that in real time, that device right in their hand can say, hey, by the way, Barbara, this is outside of specification. You now need to do this, right? It becomes very interactive. It's instantaneous in that end user's hands, right? And this is really where we start to see that buy-in of leaving paper and coming electronic and really starting to become as close as you can to absolute instantaneous or real time, right? Doesn't just need to happen, when you talk about CCPs, we also talk about sanitation programs, prerequisite programs, preventative controls. So an example of a sanitation deficiency form, right, that someone's actually entering into the system. A couple nice elements of this, if there's many of you sitting there going, yeah, we don't use mobile today, we don't have Wi-Fi throughout our facility. One of the really nice things here is that SafetyChain. These are all built as native apps. And what I mean by that is they're available on the Google Play Store that we're all aware of. They're available in the Apple Store, right? And what this allows you to do, because it is a native app, it's actually working. It allows you to work offline. So we understand we have customers today that are out on a dock, out on a pier, out in the field, in the far reaches of their 500,000 square foot facility that doesn't have Wi-Fi, right? So the idea is that this tool, this form, all of the forms that you've seen up to this point, allow you to work offline. You can't just stop your job now because you're not connected. We understand that, and that's what this tool allows you to do, right? Obviously, again, that ability to take direct observation, to take a photograph. Here, when we're talking about inside your four walls, it becomes much more applicable, right? The idea that you see something, you take a photograph of that, and it attaches it directly to that inspection as well. Again, real-time notifications. Notifications can be generated out. One of the fun things I like to see in the paper-based forms that we all use today, right? There's always these directions written. Hey, if this happens, make sure you go notify Barbara, right? So I now got to write something down, then I'm going to go find Barbara, right, and let her know what just happened. The concept here is that our system does away with all of that, right? It knows, it has that logic built in, it can do that real-time verification, and oh, by the way, if someone needs to be notified, the system can actually generate out that notification. That notification can include in any of the results that were captured in that form. It can even include in a hyperlink back to the actual test, right, which you're seeing here. In this case, the test has created a corrective or a preventative action. That needs to be tracked. That needs to be tracked to completion. It also needs to have the ability to be reported against. And that's what you're gaining here with this system, right? So yeah, it's fun to talk about doing away with paper, but think about all the benefits that come with that. Think about the benefits of putting something in someone's hands that becomes instantaneous, right? That truly becomes real time. But then at the same time, now you have this data which you can transfer into information, right? So on that line, let's talk about the ability of now having all of this data in a database, right? Pulling it all together into one centralized system. This is a screenshot of our homepage here at SafetyChain. The nice thing about the SafetyChain application is it's completely rules and roles based. So depending on who you are and where you sit, it can determine what you should or shouldn't see within the system. But on top of that, for many of you, I know sitting on the call today, you know, you're the director of FSQA. You're overseeing 1, 2, 3 facilities, maybe different distribution centers you're overseeing. What these home pages have allowed our customers to do is to come to one place and see what's important to them. This is not only rules and roles based, but it's configurable by the end user. It allows an end user to place different reports on their home page that are most important to them, right? So as you think about different people in your organization that might utilize this, if I'm part of the operational side, it might be very important for me to see different data points that are coming into the system. If I'm part of that, if I'm the FSQA director, I want to see how I'm doing on certain compliance standards like you're seeing here, or open corrective actions like you're seeing here, right? Do I have any open corrective actions or NCRs that haven't been followed up on? How am I doing on my complaint or HACCP program or my operational program? So the idea that an end user has one place to come to very quickly at that homepage, they don't have to go clicking down through the system to find the information they're looking for. Rather, they come to this homepage and it gives them that overall scorecard, if you will, that overall place where they can come see a whole bunch of different reports. Think about the different reports that you run today to try to make sure, monitor and make sure things are being done and are occurring, right? At the same time, I keep mentioning this data to information. It is very important. Everyone talks about it. The BRC code talks about it, right? Continuous improvement. How do I show continuous improvement? How do I capture this data and make it usable? Understand that within our system, all the records are reportable, right? All of them can be pulled back. Every transaction in our system captures an unalterable date and timestamp. But now this really starts to let you mine that data, right? How often do we all get asked, you know, where you're sitting there, your boss, your vice president, your owner of your company comes to you and says, well, can you tell me what happened specifically with this product? Can you tell me what's happened specifically on this day? All of a sudden, all of that is accessible at your fingertips, right? It's readily accessible to you, so you can pull this up very quickly. You can export this information out to Excel and PDF and Word documents and do all of that fun stuff. But again, it has that efficacy behind it as well, where you have those unalterable date and timestamps to show who did what, when it was done, and it can create that additional resource for you. So let's take it to one last piece here, and we'll wrap up the demonstration. But this is something that we really think is inventive, and this is something that has come from our customer community. This is something that we started to build out, and everybody uses this term, on-demand audit readiness, right? I think we talked a little bit today about unannounced audits and how do you prepare for those, and we're really trying to get the whole entire industry away from, you know, kind of polishing everything up. This should become a lifestyle. This should become what we do, how we do it all the time, right? So how does this work? Well, within the SafetyChain platform, we have actually built in the BRC code, right? We've actually built in the sections, the subsections, the clauses, and the description. And one of the things that you're tasked with doing today is capturing your internal documents, right? It's not just those supplier documents that everybody talks about. It's also your internal standard operating procedures, right? Those documents that define how you're going to comply with these subsections, with these clauses, with these codes. And within our system, you have the ability to put these documents under management. The documents can generate notifications based on review, right? So a document's coming up on being reviewed. It will generate notifications for that. it will also automatically create revision logs. So who touched it, when it was touched, when it was approved, any comments associated with that approval. And oh, by the way, if your auditor wants to see any of the historic documents just for proof, they're all being tracked in the system as well, right? Oh yeah, here was my version 7, now we're on version 8, by the way, and here's Barbara who approved it, when she approved it, and any comments associated with it. But we still do have that historical reference as well, which has been beneficial to our customers. Now, we understand that passing audits isn't just pulling up a piece of paper and saying, hey, I'm compliant because I have this standard operating procedure in place, right? As I think was mentioned, if it's not documented, it wasn't done. So what about a system that can actually not only tie these documents together to close clauses and codes and subsections, but also tie the records together? So typically that standard operating procedure is going to reference a series of tasks that need to be done. Those tasks, those forms, can now be aggregated. They can be rolled up against that subsection, against that clause, against that description, right? So now all of a sudden you have a system where very quickly you can produce back those proof points, right? Hey, yes, here is my document. Here's my standard operating procedure. Here's who reviewed it. Here's any comments associated. Oh, by the way, here's the last 6 months. Here's the last 30 days of these records. Here's the last 30 days of these records with their corrective actions associated with it, or if there were any corrective actions associated with it. And again, each of these records, each of these transactions has an unalterable date and time stamp associated with it. So really bringing that record keeping, that proof it was done, back into the system and making it available. And again, showing to everyone that it is documented, it was done, and now you have that information to prove it, all wrapped into one system. So as we talk about SafetyChain for food, hopefully you got just a little bit of an idea, a little bit of a glimpse into the system there today. It is a software as a service system. It is deployed globally today. The idea that it can be accessed anywhere you have internet capability. And as we talked about, not even having to shut down your operations because you're offline, the ability to go anywhere, do these audits, to capture this information, providing that centralized repository, right? That home page to come to. Where do I stand? You should know where you stand immediately, every day, right? Every moment. When you log in there, you can see, hey, do I have a document that's coming up on expiration? Do I have an outstanding corrective action? Do I have a form that wasn't completed? All of that lives and resides in the system. There's none of that fear of, oh, man, you know, at the end of the day, at the end of the week, I hope we got all those tasks done. I hope we had those forms signed properly. All of that is built into the system. It's a living, breathing system that we want to, again, start to create that environment, to match that environment of what you're running today within your organization. So with that, I'm going to hand this back to Barbara and thank everyone for your time. I will just point out one last thing here on this slide, right? Obviously, as I mentioned, it is software as a service. We do see and we understand the value of technology, but I also understand every one of your organizations sitting here on the phone, unfortunately, aren't sitting on an open checkbook to go buy technology. So we do work very hard with hard dollar ROIs with our customers, that return on investment, and the ability for us to deliver a solution like this really comes back to us assigning a whole team of folks, a real full service deployment, right, and maintenance. As John mentioned earlier about the BRC code, as that changes, it's important to have a vendor that's going to change those codes, those clauses, those subsections with them, right? So as those changes are made, we build those into our application. It's all part of that ongoing maintenance of a system. It's truly living and breathing, right? It changes every day, just like your operation does every day, right? So with that, Barbara, sorry for the fake out, but I am going to hand it back to you, and we can go from there.
Not a problem at all, Dave. We're going to, there's some information here. Again, we'll get the recording of both sessions with John and with Dave out to everybody early next week. There's a lot of white papers and other videos on our website, and you can contact info@safetychain.com or fill out the post-session form to get more information. And we've got people that have been on with us for quite some time here today. I'll open up the Q&A tab. If anybody's got any questions for Dave, please feel free to put those in now. We'll wait a minute or so to see if we get any questions. Excuse me. We already do have a question. We have a question from from Sandy saying, Dave, it sounds like BRC is going to be changing their code soon. Do we or does SafetyChain maintain the updated codes?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's actually SafetyChain, right? So SafetyChain, as those codes come out, we're going to work with John and BRC on what those changes are. You know, as we went from issue 6 to issue 7, that's something that we bake into our platform. So that is on us, right? It is part of our maintenance. It is just part of that routine that we'll go through, and we'll work very closely with BRC as they do those updates, and we will program them into our application for you.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and another question from Andy saying that we have BRC and SQF at different facilities. Can the system handle more than one program?
Sure, it absolutely can. The nice thing about the SafetyChain application is that it can be accessed at a corporate level, but configured at the facility level. So we understand, and we have many customers who run multiple facilities. It's not just the fact that you're running BRC or SQF, it's the fact that you might be running different products, or because of the geography, you have different programs in place. So yes is the answer to the question. Yes, we do support both those codes, and yes, you can have one facility that's SQF, one facility that's BRC. Those facilities can use the system, and by the way, if it was Andy, I think, that asked the question, if you want to see a roll-up of both those facilities, you can actually have access to that with proper roles and rights into the system.
Well, thank you very much. Those were the questions that we had. Thank you, everybody, for your time today, and we hope to see you at the Food Safety Consortium. And thanks again to Food Safety Tech for co-sponsoring this event with us, and we hope everybody found it informative. Have a great day, everyone.